Badger fans, let's talk about the Rutgers game coming up. How confident should we be? How much of what Locke did against Purdue do we think can carry forward? And is this maybe sneakily the biggest game left on the schedule, just in terms of how it can direct the season if we win or lose? All that more, Locked on Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked on Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herring, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Let's bring Curtis Holland back on the show, a returning guest and a guy who we just got done talking for 30 minutes. I just love talking ball with Curtis. We should have recorded that one. Next time, we're going to record our freeform show, and we'll just release it as like bonus content.
Badgers After Dark.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out of that. But I want to start here, man. You've been a guy who consistently has been, I think, a little bit higher on Braedyn Locke than maybe the consensus. I think that's fair to say. What did you see against Purdue, and how much of that translates forward? Because there is a conversation of how much of that was us and how much of that was Purdue.
Sure. I've always been kind of high on Locke ever since I really heard his backstory, and also, watched some interviews of him from, back when he was, leaving Texas, going to Mississippi State, going to, Wisconsin. There was actually a really good interview over the winter last year where he went back and interviewed on a Texas high school football podcast. I think I posted in the Discord back then. But Locke's an impressive dude. He's very, very smart. I think, Longo said it. I was first impressed with him when he immediately took the second string job last year. And I think I said this, kind of coming into the spring last season. I'm like, hey, if we have a choice between a guy who can better run the offense and a guy with more physical tools for our quarterback, I'd rather take the guy who can run the offense, because at least you're on time, you're hitting the open plays, you're doing the things you need to do. I don't know if we necessarily did that. I thought, I heard the practice reports like everybody else. Tyler Van Dyke was making some good plays in practice, had a stronger arm. Locke was struggling at times. I heard all those practice reports. So I understand why the team or why the staff went with TVD. Now he's injured. Now we get to see what Locke brings. And what I think you're seeing is week over week over week is improvement. Now, I think it was mentioned today. I mean, this is maybe Locke's 8th start as a quarterback. He's a redshirt sophomore, right? So when you watch him coming in the Bama game, he was behind on almost every throw he had. And it's not really his fault. You're playing Alabama. It's a next level tier in competition. He's thrown in, he's maybe got 20% of the snaps up until that point in practice. Like, he just wasn't necessarily in the position to make a lot of plays in the air raid, especially against a team that, quite frankly, over-talented us. I know they lost to Vanderbilt. Not to take anything away from Vanderbilt, I don't think that that's a game they lose more often than not. If I think that they play that game another 10 times, they win 10 times. And that's not to take away from the fact that Alabama still has a ton of talent. So obviously I don't think he played well in that game. I think you then see him going to USC. He comes out the gate swinging. I think he's playing better, making the right reads. When you go into the second half of that game, there were some times where I don't know if the offense set him up for success. I don't think the play calling was the best in the second half of that game. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of feel that way as well. So then you see him coming into this game, and what is he? What can he do against a team that we overmatch now, that we're better than? And you saw some ups and downs in the first half. Our 2 scoring drives, he was excellent. He got the ball out on time. He found open players, was able to make the right reads. And then there was a couple times where I think he was maybe questioning things, doubting things. And I think you see a guy like that go into halftime, look at what his play is, and just decide, you know what? No, I can do this. I'm better than this. This team we're better than this team. I know this offense inside and out. Like, it's time to kind of live up to that. He comes out in the second half and he scorches them. I mean, he has the best Badger quarterback performance in the quarter I've seen since Russell Wilson. I mean, that was absurd. He was 12 for 12, I think, in the quarter, and 2 touchdowns. And he had 17 checks to the line, 16 of which were positive plays. 1 were a touchdown. I mean, this is a 7th start. Now it's Purdue. They're not very good. It's like, look, I'd be surprised if we did that against Air. Okay, like, this team has yet to show that it's capable of doing anything like that against anybody. I look back at previous Badger teams. We've beaten overmatched teams. When was the last time we had a quarterback throw for 300 yards? I mean, it just doesn't happen. So, I look at that and I say, yeah, it's Purdue, but also we did it. It's proof of concept. It can be done, right? And now the team sees that. The coaches see that. And most importantly, I think Locke sees it. And so I think you've seen improvement to him week over week and even quarter over quarter yesterday. I don't know if it goes back. At least I don't think Rutgers is the team that can reset that and maybe send him back a little bit in his development. I think we only continue to move forward from here.
Well, let me point this out too. This is really the first time he gets to go into a full week with starter reps with something to build on, right? Like something to really continue building on because you look back at his career, man, he comes in halfway through Iowa last year. He had to play Ohio State last year. He comes in halfway through Bama. He has to play USC on the road. That's a brutal stretch, man. He's finally getting some rhythm. He's finally getting some teams that maybe don't, like you said, overmatch us. I'm super excited to see what he carries over from last week. It wasn't perfect last week, but to your point, that's as good of a quarterback play as Mertz first game against Illinois. Like maybe you go back to that we've seen at Wisconsin.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised because I did go back to that, not this week, but I remember, I think before maybe one time last year, I was curious about his start. And a lot of Mertz's, touches in that game, there was a lot of, 5 to 10 yard throws, short outs, quick outs. Illinois' defense, I'll say this. I think that Illinois defense was worse than the Purdue defense last week. The way that they just let people wide open in that game, it was wild. that was COVID. Obviously, people had different methods of practicing in COVID. I don't think Illinois really did a good job with that. The rules in Illinois were way different. It's an incredibly different situation. But, what I liked about Locke is that when you watch his high school film, and I don't know how many times I have to repeat this. Dude set the all-time state record in Texas 6A football, like all time, in what is many argue the most difficult division in all of high school football.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, 6A, that is the top of Texas. Like that is
DeSoto, Duncanville, North
Texas
Shore,
Mm-hmm.
Permian. Oh, that's Permian. I don't even know if they're 6A.
That's the elite of high school football.
Yeah.
More touchdowns at the high
Friday
school
Night Lights
football than Braedyn Locke.
Yeah, he set the all-time record. And when you watched him play, he looked exactly like he did in the third quarter last week. He was wheeling and dealing. Dude had confidence. He had swagger. He had some edge to him, and he would wheel and deal teams. And these are teams with guys playing at Texas, guys playing at Alabama, guys playing in the SEC, guys playing in the Big Ten, like across the board everywhere. One of his quarterbacks his sophomore year was Jackson Smith and Jigba. Dude played with the top talent, right? So he knows what that looks like. He knows what it's like to be in that type of situation. And I'll say this. I think the pressure he probably faced as a Texas high school quarterback, if it's not quite as high as Wisconsin, it's pretty close. It's a different environment. I think Mabry lost one game last year and got booed.
Yeah, it's like getting booed in the cafeteria. Right. Think about
that. It's a different kind of stress down there. It's a different kind of pressure cooker. So, but him being able to do that, I think is why I look at these, I look at what he's doing now and I think, yeah, he can do this. Physical tools aside, I know people got a lot of comments about that, but I don't think if he can play like that, I don't know if it matters.
Well, I think it matters in the sense of, I think you're right. Like, I think there's kind of two slices to this. He is physically not as imposing as certain elite quarterback traits. Like, he's not quite as big. His arm is good. I'll say this. I think people underrate his arm, but it's not an elite arm, right? Like, then there's plays where you see some of that arm strength where he's off his back foot and he can't drive the ball quite as well as other quarterbacks. But for the most part, at the college level, if you can anticipate, if you can read, if you know where you're supposed to go, if you can make checks at the line of scrimmage, that puts you ahead of the game of like 70% of college quarterbacks. You can be very good being Braedyn Locke without having an elite arm. The elite arm is just the thing that separates guys, right? That's what makes you a top 10 draft pick. And Locke is not going to be that, but there's no reason if he can't play with the poise and the accuracy and the decision making he did with Purdue, that's more than enough to win at the college level.
Absolutely. And there were the things that I saw that I liked from him specifically. Again, a lot of it's in the third quarter because I think that was just an outstanding performance from him. He's not mobile, but he started moving and navigating the pocket incredibly well. That was one thing that I think was the most underrated aspect of, and I hate to make this comparison again, but he's the best example I can think of. The biggest and most underrated aspect of Tom Brady's game was how mobile he was in the pocket. The pocket would collapse, a guy would get a blitz, a guy would break, and he knew where to step, how to move, how to shift, such that it was a little movement. It was subtle. You couldn't really tell, but it threw the defender way off his track, right? And he might have smoked his tackle. He might have smoked the guard. He just was out of position because Brady made a couple of simple shifts out of the way and was able to position himself such that he could make a good play. Locke did a lot of that in the third quarter. There were some times where Nelson got beat or Malman got beat to the outside,
Mhm.
and Locke was able to just shift over enough, tread his feet, step forward enough so that he could step up and make a pass, right? And that's what you need from a guy who's maybe not able to run out like a Mordecai and extend the play by running out in space, and be able to make a guy miss. You need to be able to step up in the pocket, navigate the pocket. I mean, that's the whole point of the pocket. That's what quarterbacks did for up until, I guess, I don't even know who the first running quarterback you'd think of, like a Roger
Randall,
Staubach or like a,
Randall.
like
Yeah,
like
Cunningham,
yeah,
Staubach.
like then you have like a Troy Smith win the Heisman. That's the first time I really started paying attention to quarterbacks like that. Like that's how all quarterbacks played: navigate the pocket, move in space. Like you got to be able to create room for yourself. That's what he does. He's just
Well,
old school.
now he needs to be able to do it consistently, though. And
Oh, exactly. Well,
we're
and
gonna
that's the point. I mean, you need to be able to do that consistently. The other thing I think that I liked was in the RPO action, instead of it being a read to run, which is what I think a lot of what they were having TVD do. You saw a lot of read with a pass option.
Yeah.
There was one play where I believe it was the first quarter where it was a handoff. We ended up getting 10 yards. It was, I mean, you could have read it either way. I think he was looking at the middle linebacker and he stayed there, so I probably headed it off. But there was a seam route with Nowakowski right off that handoff that if he were to pull it, it'd have been a 10-yard shoot. If the middle linebacker vacated, he probably could have hit that play even with a middle linebacker there. But it's just little things like that you see that are a little bit different as to how I think they're going to use Locke in the RPO game, to go back to a conversation from weeks before.
I think that's a great point, because I think that allows you to continue operating inside this offense without drastically changing. You're just changing the flavor of how it's going to look a little bit, but that action is still there. And we've seen him execute that a couple times with that kind of run pass option instead of that kind of run keep option. All right, we're going to pause there. We're going to come back. We're going to talk Rutgers. A game Curtis has pretty strong feelings about, and the importance of this game for the rest of the season. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Game Time. I talk about it all the time, man. Like, this is obviously a sports show. We come on here, we talk Badgers, we talk basketball, football, college football. There's a lot of things in life to do. And I encourage everyone to take some moments and go do that much stuff. Do as much stuff as you can do, right? Because you're never going to be on your deathbed. This is something somebody told me one time. He said, Ryan, you're never going to be on your deathbed and be like, doggone it, I did too many things. Go do more stuff. Go to Game Time. Buy tickets to concerts and the ballet and opera and monster truck rallies and Transformer movie premieres, whatever it is. Maybe not that one. That franchise has really gone downhill. But whatever you want to do, go get those tickets over on Game Time. It's a great deal. Snag the tickets without the stress over on Game Time. Download the app. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Terms to apply. Again, redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Go do more stuff. Use Game Time to get there. All right, let's talk Rutgers, man. This one to me, I want to start with this. This one to me is a incredibly important game, right? Because I think if you win this game, then you're rolling into Northwestern with momentum. I think you beat Northwestern. You go into Penn State 5-2 at home. That might be a night game. Man, things unlock. I think the bowl streak stays alive at that point. I think you have a potential to have momentum into Penn State and maybe give them a scare. You lose this game, though, I think it pushes the team. It turns that conversation from last week into Purdue, all that good mojo, into maybe that was a mirage. Maybe we're not really there. That proof of concept's not here. I don't want to put too much on one road game against a solid Rutgers team, but it feels really important in the scheme of this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. So I obviously last week we put up 52 points. I thought that we could get up in this game. I thought that was one of the outcomes that we had, where if we come out swinging and we step on the gas, we could really blow this team out. I did not anticipate us coming out last week struggling and still putting up 21 points, having struggled our way through the first half, being up 21-6, 2 interceptions, a muff punt. Like, those are things that are crazy, right? But we were up 21-6 going into the thing. I look at when was the last time we put up a score like that versus a Big Ten team? It was Northwestern 2022. We won, I think, 48-7, something like that. We went the next week and we lost to a reeling Michigan State team, 28-21 in overtime. But I think about what was the difference between that Michigan State team that we came off the thing and played versus this Rutgers team. That Michigan State team had 2 NFL receivers on it that were just straight up dudes and mossed our corners. Hallman probably doesn't want me to bring that one up, right? That was not his brightest moment. Rutgers doesn't have anything like that. I look at Rutgers. Rutgers is kind of benefiting from some preseason dark horse conversation. A lot of media people trying to sound smarter than they are, talking about, well, Rutgers, that's an experienced team. They're bringing some things back. That might be a team that's a dark horse. They don't have to play in the Big Ten East anymore. They don't have to play Penn State. They don't have to play Ohio State. They don't have to play these teams. Like, that could be a team that has something to them, right? On top of that, you return essentially most of, if not all your offensive line. I'm not, don't quote me on this because I don't know it off the top of my head, but you return most, if not all, your offensive line. Yeah, or your offensive linemen. You return Kyle Monangai, who's a good running back. He's good, not great. We'll get back to that. And then I think you return some receivers, and you bring in an Nathan Kalikmanis, who's ran this offense with Kirk Shiraka, their offensive coordinator at Minnesota, right? And, you know, Badger fans watching this game, you'll see that this is literally Minnesota's offense from the last 5 years, like to a T. So you'll see that pretty quickly. And then on the same side, you flip it over on the defensive side, it return most of their starters. They return a lot of guys. You know, Shano's a good defensive coach. He's a good culture guy. I think he's the right guy for Rutgers for what they need. So, you know, they got a lot of experience, and it's, this is a good team. And they start 4-0 and then before losing to Nebraska. But I think what people fail to understand is that despite that, this team is still Rutgers. I think we've seen over the last few weeks, you know, that maybe experience, while it's valuable, there might be some elements to which, well, maybe we want to see some younger guys who maybe bring a little bit more upside to what our program has to offer, right? And you're kind of seeing that, and that's with, you know, guys that are Wisconsin guys who are experienced. Well, now we're talking about Rutgers guys, right? And no offense to the players at Rutgers, their caliber is not that of Wisconsin. I mean, I don't even think it's particularly close. Their experience is the same team that lost to us last year, in which what I believe, and I've said pretty much all season, is a worse version of this team, right? And we beat them at home last year. They beat a Miami team without a quarterback in a bowl game in New York in December. You know, I mean, cool. And then, you know, they come in this season, they're giving up 160 on the ground. They gave up 520 yards of offense to the only team that can throw the ball on their schedule, which was Washington. And the only reason they lost that game is because Washington doesn't know you need a field goal in the Big Ten, or a field goal kicker in the Big Ten, and missed 3 field goals and missed 2 fourth downs. So, you know, they lose that game, or they win that game. And then they play Nebraska last week, and they played well. It was a good game, but you didn't see anything in that game that was like, oh man, this team, man, they can really bring it to you at any given moment. I mean, they had one really nice deep throw, and then they got to the red zone multiple times, couldn't convert on any of them, right? And that's been kind of their MO a lot this season. They've struggled in the red zone. So I look at this team and I look up and down the list. I don't know who or what threatens me if I'm Wisconsin, thinking from a defensive perspective or from an offensive perspective, like who is going to step up and stop us? Well, now that requires.
Let me interject there. I would say, I mean, if you're looking at this game, you pessimistically maybe as a Wisconsin or nationally as like a national analyst, you're saying Kyle Monangai led the Big Ten in rushing last year. He's at 5.6 per carry this year, I believe, against a Wisconsin's rush defense that is still not very good. I mean, statistically, by the eyeball test, this is not traditional Wisconsin rush defense. I think we all acknowledge that. That's the matchup if you're going to be worried. And I think that's a matchup that worries me. I agree with you that Kyle Monangai is not an elite running back. He is not a top tier running back. I think he's very good. I think I'm probably a little higher on him than you are. But I think you'd acknowledge that.
And here's, I think he is good. I think he can get skinny. I think he's strong. He's quick. And I think he's going to get some yards. I'm not opposed to thinking he'll probably end up with 100 yards on us. I don't think that's really, to me,
like he'll get 100 yards.
Yeah, like I think he'll get. I think he'd be able to get 100 yards on us.
I agree.
But then they think about it like that though. If he's their best player and he gets 100 yards, and that's our weakest part of our defense, what else are they doing?
Well, I think he could get one. I think he could get like 130 or 140.
See, I don't know if I agree with that, and here's why. I think that when you look at this team, they're not built to come from behind. Yeah. You look at their defense, they're giving up 160 on the ground, which is worse than our defense, believe it or not. We've played Alabama and USC. Who have they played? Washington, Nebraska. I mean, if you watched Nebraska last week, I mean, Brian Smith said it, not me. That's a worse team than us. So, you know, I look at that and I say, I'm not super impressed by what their defense has done. If we can control the ground, which we've done against better teams with better defenses, if we can make some passing plays off of that, if Locke has improved to the level that we think he potentially has, making checks at the line that are right more times than not, getting our players in positions to be successful, and our players have, you know, confidence now, especially because Rutgers runs a lot of zone. And I think Locke is particularly, if he's smart as everybody says he is, and as he looked on, you know, last week, he can pick apart his zone. He's smart enough to do that. Our team is smart enough to know what to do during his own offense. If we can pick apart this defense a little bit, we can get up a touchdown, 2 touchdowns in the first half, maybe even 3. I mean, we've averaged 21 points over the last 2 games in the first half. If we do that, they're not coming back. They're going to have to throw the ball now. And then now what are they going to do?
I agree
They're
with
not going
that.
to run their way into success. On
I
top
think
of
you
that,
can get up on them. Sorry, Mike. I just hear my kid running around. Yeah, if you can get on top of them, they're not built to come back. But I'm just not sure if from a
well, and
consistent.
here's the other thing is what I'll say about their run game. It's like Wisconsin for the last forever before we switched our offense, right? What was the problem with our run game? We get one play behind the line, one holding call, one tackle for loss, one sack. Our drive is toast.
Mhm.
We're done. Like we're done. We can't do it. So yeah, you could get maybe 10 yards. You get on a 2nd and 3, then you get a first down. Maybe you get another 9-yard run. Then you get a 1-yard run. Maybe you get an incomplete pass. Now it's 3rd and 9. Now you're toast. Now you're playing our game, right? Now we might not be able to get pressure on them, but every single one of our sacks last week, and even against USC, were for the most part coverage sacks. I don't think that Rutgers has anybody on the outside that can break open. Like they're not going to be able to get open on our back end. So yeah, eventually we'll get to the quarterback the same way we got to him versus Purdue because they just know where to go with it. And he's not as dynamic as a thrower or runner as Hudson Card was, Ethan Caligmanis, that is. So I don't really look at like I said, yeah, they could probably run the ball a little bit. But is that a recipe for success in this game? I don't think it is.
I'd be curious because I think we're both going to try to run the ball. I think what Wisconsin and are both going to want to run the ball. Both these rush defenses are suspect. Both these teams are kind of built around a veteran offensive line with some running backs they like. I think we have a better passing game in theory. I do think Locke is a better than Kaliamakis. But he's not a terrible quarterback. Like if you allow him to make that first read, which we talked about on the other show, he can hit some throws. So I don't think they're necessarily just one-dimensional, but they will lean run. But what I'm saying is if both teams are leaning run, this is going to be a game of fewer possessions. I think both teams are going to grind the clock a little bit, which comes down to who can play cleaner. Can Wisconsin play clean? They've had several games now where turnovers have been an issue, some random penalties, buffed punts. I don't know. That's my biggest concern with this team is I just haven't seen them play clean for 60 minutes. And you got to do that in Piscataway. Because I think on paper, I do agree with you. Wisconsin has more talent than Rutgers, but they've shot themselves in the foot for a lot of
and that's absolutely a fair concern. And I don't disagree with you when you say like everything I'm saying right now, all my thoughts and analysis, this is all based on us playing a clean and a good game, right? I do have some feeling that even if we don't, we can do well. I mean, like I said, we kind of backed ourselves into 21-6 last week, playing not a good first half. 2 picks, we gave them the ball in basically their red zone. We scored off a muff punt, but that was because we weren't executing. There's like a lot of things that weren't going well in the first half of that game. And yet somehow we were still up 21-6. I remind everybody, Nebraska only beat Purdue 28-10 at the end of the game. It took them a whole game to do that. Right. And we were up 21-6 at half playing terribly, to put some perspective on it. Right. So, we're going to have to play well. We're going to have to build on what we did last week. I think we can. I believe we can. I believe that I've seen some things now that show that, hey, this team has confidence now. This team believes in itself now. There's proof of concept. We never quit the whole season. We got blown out by Alabama. We lost to USC. The team never quit. They kept believing. They kept executing. And each week, I felt they got better. I felt they came out. They got better. They executed better. The defense lined up better. They got better against the run over the course of the season. I think you saw it against an overmatched team, obviously. But even still, I think you saw that against USC to Bama. And then from even Bama to South Dakota, I think you saw improvements, right? And that's one of the things Fickle's always talked about is improving over the course of the season, playing your best ball at the end of the year. That's one thing that he's always talked about doing. We did the same thing last year. I thought we were playing our best game at the end of the year. I think that's going to continue. And so I think we continue that trend. I see no reason why to think we can't play better than we played this week. And if we can do that, you talk about wanting to run the ball, well, we'll be able to pass the ball too. That's pass and run versus just a team that wants to run. I think, again, it just kind of goes to, I don't really see where Rutgers has an edge other than us playing bad. If we play terribly, then yeah, they can beat us. They can drag us in the mud and they can beat us. But you flip it. When we were Wisconsin playing a team that was overmatched, like an Ohio State or an Alabama or whatever, right? We had to play perfect. Do you remember how stressful that was to think the only way we win this game is if we play perfect?
You know what it felt like? My analogy was always, it feels like you're building a dam against a river that just keeps building up. And you just can never fully dam. And eventually, the dam's going to break. Eventually, it's going to burst, and there's going to be a 17-point swing.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. We have more talent than Rutgers. We have more depth than Rutgers. We're better at We're actually better at stopping the run than them, believe it or not. We have a better offensive line than Rutgers. I think we have a better quarterback than Rutgers. Some people may agree, disagree, whatever. I think we have a better quarterback. I don't know if it's, in my opinion, particularly close. We have a better secondary than Rutgers.
Yeah.
I think we've got a better kicker than Rutgers. We're better across the board than Rutgers. I can't think of a person on Rutgers, no offense to them, that would start in our 2 deep. It's kind of like when we were playing Bama. I can't think of a person necessarily that would start in their 2 deep in Bama from our team. It's the same kind of concept.
I would say so. I don't think the gulf is quite that disparate. Like, I do think Kalmanungai would start for Wisconsin. I guess I'm higher on him. I do think their left tackle, or they have a really good tackle. It's Hall. I think his name is grades out consistently high. He's an NFL type guy. He could start potentially.
I mean, Jack Nelson had the highest grade of all tackles in college.
I know. Like, they have a pretty good line.
Just saying.
They've got veterans in the secondary, kind of like us. I don't know if it's at our caliber. They have Lewis, their defensive lineman, would start for us.
But that, to me, it's the same thing as if we were playing this, if we were Bama fans the week before the Bama game. If I'm a Bama fan, I'm looking at Wisconsin. I'm like, I mean, maybe Wohler is really good on the back end. Whatever. It's the same kind of feeling. That's what I look at when I look at this Rutgers team. And so for us, it really comes down to, are we playing our game? If we're playing our game, I don't think Rutgers has a chance. Now, if we're playing terribly, if we're showing up, we're playing like we did the second half versus USC, or the first half versus Purdue, it's going to be a little bit of a rock fight, right?
Yeah.
But even then, even if it's a rock fight, it's not a guaranteed Rutgers victory.
Well, we can win a rock fight.
That's what I'm saying. We can win a rock fight.
I just don't think the talent gap, like, between us and Rutgers is comparable to the talent gap between, like, us and Bama, right? I think our roster is closer to Rutgers, or Rutgers is closer to us. But hold on, we got to take one more quick break. Then we're going to come back, talk about a few keys of the game, a couple players that you need to look out for, and we can keep that conversation going. Plus, get a prediction that's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show, as my son comes in, is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Hi, buddy. FanDuel is your number one source for. FanDuel is your number one source for all your sports betting needs. Whatever you need to do, go over to FanDuel, find all the latest lines, parlays, teasers, spreads over there at FanDuel. Right now, if you bet $5, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed over at FanDuel. It is the number one source for all your sports betting needs, and there's a ton of stuff coming up with NFL obviously going on, college football, college basketball, and NBA will be coming up. Baseball playoffs going on over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, let's keep going here with Curtis. Come here. Let's keep going with Curtis. Keys to the game. Who are a couple players or a couple things that are going to decide this game outside of maybe what we've talked about?
Well, but first, I just wanted to go back to our last comment before the break. I mean, Rutgers has averaged about 50s in recruiting ranking over the last 3-4 years, right? Talent-wise, we've blown out Rutgers more times than not by a lot. So there is a discrepancy there. I don't think that there's a particular question to me. Experience-wise,
well, no, I think there's a discrepancy, but I don't think it's at the level of Bama compared to us. I don't think it's that type of golf, right? Where I think our roster is closer to Rutgers with where we're at in the rebuild than where we are to Alabama.
There's guys on athletes.
There's guys on Rutgers.
Our defense is significantly faster than Rutgers. When you watch them play, when you watch the film, our defense is faster than Rutgers and Nebraska. And to me, it's not particularly close. Now, our front seven I don't think it's as stout as Nebraska's is. I do think, from that perspective, Nebraska has a more stout front seven. But I would say that from a team speed perspective, we're much higher than Rutgers is. I think from an overall athlete perspective, we're much higher than Rutgers is. Is it as big as like maybe, a Jalen Milroe or Ryan Williams? I mean, those guys are freakazoids, so it's tough to make that call. But moving on to, people that I think are keys to the game this week. I think the offensive line, obviously, I don't know if that's kind of obvious to me. If we, I think that I don't think Rutgers front seven is particularly that good. I don't think their pass rush is that great. I think they've had a couple injuries. So we need to give Locke some time. I do still think Locke is, as much as I just talked about how good Locke is, I do think he needs time to function effectively. I think he needs to get in a rhythm. I think he needs to get his confidence going a little bit. If he's getting hit right out the gate, it doesn't bode well for us, just because, it doesn't bode well for any good quarterback. So I think he needs the offensive line needs to play really well. I think our receivers need to be able to get open. That's been a consistent issue that we've had this year. Obviously you saw it improve last week. It was a lot of man coverage, and they beat some man coverage, which again can be a confidence builder, beating some man coverage. Rutgers, I think, is going to play more zone versus us. So can we sit in the zones? Can we play that right? An experienced team playing zone, it's always tough. You got to make sure you're on your game when you're making those throws. So The receiving core, I think you want to see something. If Pauling's back, I think you need to see him step up and catch some passes. I think
Yeah.
he struggled with that this year, and quite frankly, it's led to a couple interceptions, which he's a veteran guy. That shouldn't happen.
That's
I
got to
think
eat him alive because he's
yeah.
too good of a player to have that. And then,
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I think he's maybe having a little bit of a down point. I think he's just got to kind of come back from that.
but talk about the receivers, right? I think it's a great point because we're seeing dudes start to step up. That's another thing I would take out of that Purdue game. Like Vinny Anthony is quickly becoming one of our more dangerous guys. Tretch had the breakout moment. We saw some stuff from CJ. Like that group is starting to break out. And then if Pauling can come back and just be the version of Pauling that we all saw last year and that we've seen in spurts this year, that's 4 dudes without Bryson
Exactly.
being limited.
And what Pauling what Tretch and Anthony did last week, that's replicatable against Purdue's defense, or against Rutgers defense. And that's the thing. Like that's what I've been trying to say in terms of athleticism. Like they can break a 60-yard run versus Rutgers defense if Rutgers defense is out of position. They're fast enough to do that. Tretch and Anthony can do that. I think Pauling can too. He seems to be this. Like I said, I don't know if there's something going on with him. If what it is, maybe he's a little injured. I mean, I did in an interview from Tretch, it sounded like maybe he's dealing with something hampering him. Yeah, I mean, that's replicatable. Is it as likely that we'll have wide open guys like we had last week? Probably not. But in terms of like being able to break away, break a play, beat coverage, yeah, we can do that against this team.
This team will be more disciplined than Purdue. Like there'll be less penalties, there'll be less pass interference. There'll be
but
less.
That doesn't mean we can't break it open. I mean, Leonard's defenses were very disciplined, and they got broken up on a lot.
I don't think it'd be quite as easy in spots. So like where a linebacker just
no, and that's what I'm not saying. I'm not gonna think it's gonna just be like, oh, they're just standing still and you just run right past them. But again, a lot of that success I think is replicatable. I think you can see some of that play out in this game. And you look defense
is important. Like that's another one. I think building
off this game especially, I think
on the road
starts important.
Yeah, I don't think you can go into halftime down you can, but you don't want to go into halftime down 10-3 or 7-6. Like you should be able to start fast on this team, build off what you did last week. And the point you made and Justin made as well is I think incredibly insightful is if you get ahead on Rutgers, they're not coming back on you. I don't think they're built for it. I don't think they're going to do it. So if you can get up 14-10, 14-3, 14-7, and you start to build on that going out of halftime, I think you win this game. I think if Rutgers comes out, though, you don't build on the momentum from last week. The game gets ugly. Both teams run the ball, so the possessions go down. That's the recipe to lose this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how you lose. I think at that point, it's a toss-up. Rutgers is what, 2.5 point favorites. That's even on a neutral field. So I think if we play a bad, because think about it, we've been consistently inconsistent. If we're consistently inconsistent, this is a 50-50 game. But if we're able to build off of the successes that we had last week, and even the successes we had against USC, where we started fast and do well, if we can build off some of that stuff, then I think we could roll this team. I really
love it.
And I don't really think I don't know why it's such a leap for people. I think maybe it's just the lack of continuity or the lack of consistency that we've shown so far this season. But if you watch the film, each week we've gotten better. The difference between last week and the weeks before, because the looks have been there. Like there's been Tretch open on a routes like that before. I mean, I know a lot of people have complained about that. There's been Vinny Anthony open on curl routes. So there's been things like that have been there.
Mm-hmm.
We just haven't hit them. And now we're hitting him.
More willing to take those shots. He's more
willing. Or be willing, exactly. Or willing to take the deep ball. Give him 50-50. Throw a ball. I mean, I doubt that TVD would have thrown that ball to Tretch in the end zone. Like, I don't think that would have happened. Like, Tretch was somewhat covered, and Braden basically said, here, I'm going to throw it up to you. You go get it. And he did. Right? And so I think that's where, for me, now we're taking those shots. Now we have the confidence to do it. We've seen some success with it. Now Tretch is I think, ready to start rolling. He's finally got kind of a little bit of that taste, right?
Go.
I think you can see these things start to open up for us. And it's not like you lost Tawi and he's not running hard. It's not like you lost Darren Dupree and he's not trying to run hard. It's not like Yak disappeared, right? It's not like, Bryson Green's injured, but it's not like he's going anywhere. He's still a good player. Like, it's not like any of these things have gone away. So it's not like you lose anything by playing some different people. It's just now you maybe open up a new aspect of our game that we didn't have before. And you can see some success there. And, oh, by the way, we still have an offensive line that's a Wisconsin offensive line that can run you over. So, I mean, that's why I said I feel really confident in this game. I mean, about as confident as I could. I don't think that I just don't look at Rutgers as like I just don't know what they do outside of trying to run the ball and hopefully they can drag us into the muck with them.
I think that is it, though. Like, I think that is it. And they'll be more disciplined on defense. They have a little better quarterback play than they had last year with Gavin Wimsatt.
One thing I'll say about the slow in the game, I mentioned this before. and I want to ask the viewers. I told you to answer this, but there was one team that in the FBS, the team that played the slowest, trying to slow the game down last week. There was one team that did that in order to try to make an upset. And the team that played the slowest, that average snapping the ball around 3 seconds last week, was Purdue. So
Didn't work.
so we'll see what happens.
I love it, man. What's your score prediction if you had to make one?
So I'm gonna do something that's probably a little bit right now, maybe blasphemy to a lot of Badger fans and national media, especially. I'm gonna predict this to win 35-10. I think we get up 21-3, 21-7 at half. I think we get a couple quick scores. I think the game is, Rutgers tries to control the clock early on. They probably have a couple long drives. I don't think they punch it in when they get to the red zone. I think we have a couple, drives in which we can get down the field decently quickly. Maybe we have one explosive and then a couple 7-10 play drives, 3-4 minute drives that get us some points. I think you come out of halftime, I think we sit on them. I think they try to throw the ball. I think they try to, come back in the game. I think we get some interceptions. Again, I think this is a time for us to really sort of flex our muscles. I think a lot of the improvements we saw and thought we saw in camp, I think they're there. I think the problem was they weren't all the way put together yet. Maybe some of the right people weren't all the way playing yet. And now you're seeing that being the case. I think, you're seeing those improvements start to show dividends. I think you're seeing some of the added depth. Like, even if our front seven has struggled this year, we have about 2 deep worth of front seven that honestly there's no drop off. So that we just basically have a ton of depth there, right? And so I think you start to see some of that playing dividends. I think you see that, like I said, our defensive speed is way faster than last year. I think you see that start to pay off, right? I think you see a guy like a Locke who's now 2 years into the system, who's allegedly a football savant. Again, 16 for 17 on calls at the line. I think you start to see him start to cook. And then you got a Tawi who's looking to bring pain. You got an offensive line that's gotten better every single week. I think you're starting to see a lot of these things show up that we were hoping to see maybe earlier in the year.
I love it, man. He is Curtis Holland, playmaker over on the Discord. And one of the reasons I love having him on is because he thinks authentically and originally. And yeah, I could see that scenario playing out. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think a lot of fans are concerned about just the lack of overall consistency. And I think that's where you mentioned earlier why people think it might be such a leap to predict a Big Badgers win. It's because we really haven't seen 260 good minutes this entire year put together in one game. And you're right. I think we have gotten progressively better, but you would still like to see a good first half and second half against Purdue, or a good second half against USC, right? Or the ability to sustain that for more than 3 quarters. I think that's why Badger fans are a little reticent. And I get that. Like, I think that's a fair question, but if it comes together, I think you're right. Like, Rutgers isn't like this crazy team that sometimes people have made it out to be. And I agree with that point. I don't think
if we're playing Purdue this week, that'd be one thing. Or not Purdue, I'm sorry, Penn State this week, that'd be one thing, right? That's a different kind of conversation. But a Rutgers is a team that we should beat 9 times out of 10. And like, you take the preseason rankings away, you take their current record away, you take everything away on a field, just even, this is a team we should beat more times than we don't, right? Yeah. Just from a talent composite, from, skill, from who we have. This is a team we should beat. They're a disciplined team. They're a good team. They're a strong team. It's a perfect test for us to see, are these improvements real? Are the things we're seeing real? Are we really getting better each week? Which I think we are. And if we are getting better each week, it's reasonable to assume we put together more of a football game than we have so far, right? So, that's where I look at it and say, again, if we can keep the momentum going from what we started to show that we are capable of, and again, we have proof of concept now. I think we could run this game.
I think it's a great point to end it on, because this is kind of a validation game, right? We saw what proof of concept in Purdue, now validated against Rutgers, right? And that doesn't mean you're going to win 52-6, but it means, can you put together another good performance on the back of the second half of Purdue? And if you do, then you start to see that trend line. And that's what Badger fans are really looking for. They're looking for the trend line of multiple data points going up in a certain direction. Because
exactly,
if that's going up in that direction, I think you then beat Northwestern and you roll into Penn State 5-2 with some mojo.
For sure. And I think you're looking good. And I think what my biggest hope is that this week, you're hearing national media people say, did you guys forget about Rutgers? Did you guys forget about Wisconsin?
Yeah.
You watched them lose to a couple good teams and just wrote them off. Last thing I'll say, I just wanted to make this note. I was not surprised by the USC loss to Minnesota. I thought we physically beat the crap out of them. I said that, I think, as much last week. Minnesota's the absolute last place you want to go when you got the crap beat out of you, because that's all Minnesota wants to do. And maybe try to run it in the end zone at the end to beat you. I don't think USC is built for this league. I think if we played them again, I think we would beat them. I just don't think that they're ready for this. I don't think that the first half was a fluke in that game. So Badger fans who are, or fans who are looking, well, you guys lost to USC and they just lost to Minnesota. I don't put a lot of stock in that game because I don't think USC is built for this. I really don't. And I think you're going to see them get smashed this weekend by Penn State. Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think this is our chance to really start to show up on the scene.
I love it, man. He is Curtis Holland. This is Locked On Badgers. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Go check out Locked On College Football next on the Locked On Podcast Network. On Wisconsin, beat Rutgers.